Welcome to Securing America with me, Frank Gaffney, the program that's a kind of owner's manual for protecting the country we love against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to the glory of God and his kingdom. We're going to be talking about some very, very significant developments with men who tracks them better than just about anybody I know, and more than just tracking them, he makes sense of them. One can sometimes disagree with the sense he makes, but it is always sense, and usually common sense. And quite often, I think, penetratingly insightful common sense at that. His name is Rod Martin. He has become a pundit in recent years, very, very impressively so, with his Rod Martin Report, which you can find at rodmartin.org. He is now a very, very highly sought-after contributor to programs like ours. We like to think we have first dibs because he's the chairman of the board of the Institute for the American Future, which makes this program possible. We very much appreciate that, as well as his myriad contributions in various ways to what we do, both here and as an institute. Rod, you have in your background a lot of business expertise and success, as well as in the public policy arena, notably working in that space for then Governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, who has gone on to other things, most recently as our current ambassador to the State of Israel. Your combined experiences in all of these spaces, I think, has greatly contributed to what your free-range mind is able to help us make sense of, as I say. And I'm particularly anxious to do that in connection with the war in Iran at the moment, most immediately. But first, again, just welcome. Thank you so much for finding some time for us, as always.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about this piece that you've published on the rodmartin.org page, in which you're really talking about a trap that Donald Trump set for the Iranians with respect to the Strait of Hormuz. It's a kind of prism through which you look at a lot of different aspects of the present conflict, and I'd be anxious to have you share those insights with our audience.
Well, we talk about this every week, so it won't be a big shock to your viewers in particular that I was saying a week ago and a week before that. Donald Trump has no intention of letting up on these people. So, we go into these talks and everybody's kind of hair on fire because they're afraid Trump's going to give away the store. But immediately before any of that was announced, he posted that Iranians should not be disheartened by negotiations. We are not going to abandon you. Well, okay, that's almost identical to what he was saying in January when the mantra was help is on the way. And everybody discounted that. Oh, no, he doesn't really mean it. Trump always chickens out, all this kind of stuff. Well, okay, that hasn't really been a good bet so far. So we go to Pakistan. We spend several days getting ready for those talks, and what the president understands just intuitively from decades of negotiating complex deals is that this is a fractured group of people. They aren't uniform at this point. There are a bunch of different factions, and they don't trust each other. And they know that the easiest exit for any faction other than themselves is to cut a deal with Trump, get paid a ton of money, and get a villa on the French Riviera like baby Doc Duvalier. So they're all freaked out at each other, which is exactly the infighting he wanted to set up because that's what he does. And sure enough, they get to Pakistan, not just with the negotiators we expected, but seemingly half of Tehran. And they're all looking over each other's shoulder the whole time. And of course it comes to nothing. It cannot
Well, I
come
have to
easy.
just add, Rod, almost all of them being pedigreed jihadists with blood on their hands, including American bloods, right?
Because those are the people most in danger of being hanged from a lamppost
Right.
if the Iranian people successfully rise and overthrow this government. So
Yeah.
anyway,
But let me just ask you one quick question on this, because we've been hearing a lot about this sort of mosaic strategy as one of the great, triumphs of Iranian, strategic planning for an eventuality like this. You're saying that it actually has created a profound vulnerability for the regime. Is that right?
well, of course it has. This is a totalitarian system. If you lose central command, you have a bunch of competing fiefdoms. So, these guys may be ideologically aligned, but that doesn't mean that they want to submit to that other one over there. So, and they don't have to, because they're well armed, or at least they're well armed compared to each other, not compared to what they were a month ago. So this is creating havoc in the Iranian system. And the core thing that the Iranians know is we have to build a nuclear weapon. We're so close to being able to deliver it to Washington or Dallas. We've got an IRBM that in theory can hit Diego Garcia. We shot it down, but still it had the range. Well, they lied about that. Just like they lied about not wanting nukes. They lied about the range of their weapons. Their weapons can now hit Paris, Berlin, or London. They have orbited a satellite. They are perfectly capable of upgrading that into an ICBM with relatively minimal difficulty. And now you've got a nuclear armed Iran that's holding Kansas City hostage. No, thank you. And so the president was never going to waver on that, and the Iranians can never give it up. So we went through this charade. We created tons of infighting in the Iranian system. We proved to the world that Trump wasn't the madman who was going to destroy a civilization. He'll actually sit down and talk with you and try to come to a reasonable deal. And when all is said and done, he just snaps the trap shut. They have pretended to have this toll booth in the Strait of Hormuz, which has not at any point been effective. What we just did is flip the script. We are now blockading the strait. Chinese tankers are being turned back. They can't get Iranian oil out, therefore, they can't pay for their war. And as soon as we get the strait cleared to our satisfaction, Donald Trump will let exactly who he wants through the strait and no one else until this is resolved. It's really remarkable. It's also completely predictable if you know Donald Trump.
Yeah. And I guess the key point here is that in flipping the script, as you put it, that ability to determine who was going to get access to the strait and who was going to get, therefore, the sales of their oil or gas or whatever, um, is no longer something that the Iranian regime can exercise dominion over. It's in our hands, Donald Trump specifically, and will remain so as long as he sees fit, presumably. What we're going to talk about on the other side of a break is how does this look to the rest of the world, and in particular to people who want to ship things and have insurance to do it. This is a very interesting subset of the larger play that we're going to talk about with Rod Martin. You're not going to want to miss it. Be right back. We're back. So is our pundit in residence, our friend Rod Martin. He has been incredibly insightful on a whole host of issues, and you can benefit from his insights in addition to watching him weekly on this program, and a lot of others, by the way, but also at rodmartin.org. Subscribe to his Rod Martin report. You'll find it very, very illuminating. Rod, speaking of illuminating, there is a certain rancor, I think it's fair to say, operating between President Trump and some of our so-called allies, notably in Europe, who benefit enormously from oil coming out of the Strait of Hormuz when it does, but don't seem to have much interest in trying to ensure that it will flow there, at least by being helpful to us in protecting the ships coming out. Talk a little bit about where this alliance relationship stands and how they're looking at this idea of a blockade.
Well, the trap wasn't just for Iran. And that's becoming painfully clear to the people with presence of mind to see it in Europe and Asia. So we have this huge armada off the coast. Obviously, we can just crack down on shipping if we choose to. I mean, my goodness, the Lincoln's sitting out there, the Tripoli's sitting out there. We've got bases all over the region. And contrary to Iranian propaganda, no, they're not all destroyed. That's just silly. But not only that, it's a 2-week ceasefire. And in exactly that window, we add the USS Boxer with its Marine Expeditionary Unit, but also with its flat top. It can operate 20 F-35Bs very easily if we choose to do that. We've got the Ford going back on station in the Red Sea. We were told the Iranians had sunk the Ford at least 7 times. And somehow they were able to fire a missile, apparently through a Star Trek transporter, so that it detonated exactly in the laundry room. And it was going to be out of commission for 2 years. But in fact, it was out of commission for 2 weeks. So it's coming back on station, and the Bush is
But
about to
not
be.
because it was successfully attacked, I don't think. It was just part of
No,
the
of course not.
rotation.
How would they hit a carrier? So, especially in the Red Sea. I mean, it is just silly. And the Bush is coming on station in the Eastern Mediterranean, which closes the trap. That's another carrier strike group. We've got more than enough force to finish whatever job Trump wants to finish. So, what is the play here for Iran? Well, they attempted this toll booth strategy, and the idea was actually to play off insurance. This is the thing that a lot of people really aren't understanding. The Iranians have not ever been able to close the strait. They have been able to make it riskier. They do have mines, they do have fast boats. We've pretty well sunk their navy and a lot of those fast boats, and we've cleared a decent number of the mines. But there's enough there that if you're an insurer, you really want to think twice about insuring anything passing through the strait. So several weeks ago, Donald Trump closed another trap on Keir Starmer, who you will recall is trying to give Diego Garcia, our most important Indian Ocean base, to a Chinese proxy. He denied
This
us
is the
use,
Prime
at least
Minister of Great
briefly,
Britain. Yeah.
of key British bases for this operation. Absolutely absurd. And 5 weeks into the war, he's still not able to get a British destroyer even to Cyprus to defend his own bases. It's absurd. So, from Trump's point of view, why does Lloyd's of London get all the profit from ensuring maritime risk 80 years after the empire, when it's the U.S. Navy, not the Royal Navy, that is underpinning security of every choke point? And so, beginning of March, they announced a new maritime insurance facility backed up by the U.S. Development Finance Corporation. Chubb will take lead on the actual policy writing. We are in a position, it's still ramping up. There's still time for Starmer to repent, but we are ramping up to be able to take the maritime risk market entirely from the City of London and transfer it to the United States. And our allies in Europe are going to have to wake up. We are not going to tolerate the freeloading. They pay less than 30% of the bill of the alliance. There are no enemies in North America. We are entirely doing NATO to defend European countries from other European countries who aren't really a threat to them. The Russians still can't get to Kiev after 4 years. So what's the big deal? Germany ought to be able to take care of that without a huge permanent U.S. presence. And frankly, we don't even need the bases. It would really stink to have to shut down Ramstein, but the truth is we could reactivate our bases in Morocco, and the flight time from Barksdale is almost identical. We don't need these dependents who are masquerading as partners. And this is a wake up call to all of them. Trump is forcing them to deal with that reality. It is my hope that they actually smell the coffee, get back on side, become actual partners, meet their 5% of GDP goal, do the things necessary for this to be a functioning alliance again, instead of just an outsourcing of all defense expenditures to the United States. But if not, we're going to be in perfectly good shape, from Morocco to Israel to the UAE to a free Iran, and all of this boxes in China. And that's actually my final point on that. Yesterday, Trump signed a new defense agreement with Indonesia, which directly impacts our ability to control the Straits of Malacca, Lombok, and Sunda. That is nearly 100% of China's oil and food imports. They are toast.
Wow. Rod, this bears further development. Talk a little bit about how exactly you see that working. Would we be physically basing naval assets in the areas around those straits? These are waterways that are at least as important as the Strait of Hormuz and, you know, the Suez Canal. But doesn't it require a physical presence? And is that what's being cleared now by this agreement?
Well, this physical presence begins to include the Indonesian Navy, which is which adds significantly to available hulls. Remember, our biggest problem right now is our Navy is absolutely dominant, but it has about half as many hulls in the water as it needs. And Trump is really aware of that. That was, you'll recall, key to the South Korean trade deal. They're going to come in and expand the Philadelphia shipyard and make it capable of building nuclear submarines, which will increase our capacity to build nuclear submarines by about 50%. Everything he's doing is aimed at growing the Navy. But one way you grow the Navy is you push Japan to be more involved. You arm Australia and hope Albanese loses the next election. You sign these agreements with regional powers like Indonesia, who control key real estate. It's not that we don't control those straits right now. It's that it's much easier for us to control them in a crisis if we have the local country on side. And at the end of the day, what we're really showing in Hormuz is an object lesson to China. Yes, we are starving Iran of cash. We're also greatly increasing the price of oil to a China that has been getting 40% of its oil from sanctioned, steeply discounted sources that are now largely going away. But ultimately, we are showing that we can control any and all choke points on the planet, and there's not a thing China can do about it. All of that Navy, honestly, all the talk, I'm sorry, that's a brown water Navy. They have a handful of ships that can operate outside of Chinese coastal waters. Most of their ships would not go 1,000 nautical miles in a straight line. So they're seeing that they really are in a box, and they need to make a deal with Trump in May.
This is a topic to which we will return, I know, with you in the days to come. Rod Martin, this is very, very important stuff. I do want to cover another of the topics that you've addressed in our next block, and that is Mexico, and another piece of the counter-China strategy of the United States under President Trump, perhaps. That and more with Rod Martin. Stay tuned. We're back with Rod Martin of rodmartin.org. You must take a look, among other things, at a very prominently featured piece that he has written entitled, "As China Falters, Mexico Rises." We're going to devote this block of the program to exploring all of that, what it means. First of all, Rod, as I guess further evidence of the strategy that you impute to the president of despite him talking endlessly about how fond he is of Xi Jinping and how much he's looking forward to their visit, which has now been postponed again, I guess, in Beijing. Um, is he trying to take down the Chinese Communist Party, in fact, or at least very substantially impair what China has been doing to, well, wage war on us, among other things, unrestricted warfare, and threaten worse?
Oh, he's not just trying, he's succeeding. And he is going to be nice to Xi because he needs to make a deal with Xi that everybody can live with. The aim is just straight out of Reagan's playbook. You know, Reagan understood what the pundit class and the academics in America never ever got, which was that communism doesn't work. So if you give it enough time, and you isolate it from outside source of supply sufficiently, it will collapse. Its own internal contradictions will collapse the system. And we seem to think that China's different because they're capitalist. No, they're not. They're fascist. It's not the same thing. It has the appearance of free markets, but not the reality. And actually that's why it works better, because people feel like they still have something left to lose. Whereas, you know, when you collectivize everything, they know they don't. So, you know, this is why fascist dictatorships have historically lasted longer. And it's playing out here again. Trump knows that they are in deep, deep crisis. We have about a decade before the
They, the Chinese.
I'm sorry.
They, the Chinese.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are in a demographic crisis that will start coming to a head over the next decade. They are on track to lose 75% of their population over the next 75 years. And if that were in a straight line, that would be okay. The world doesn't end. But Paul Ehrlich would be happy. But the problem is, it's not a straight line. You end up with this huge ballooning of the retired class and this ever shrinking number of working age people trying to support them. And those people have put most of their retirement savings into real estate that is depreciating as the population shrinks. So, you know, their real estate bubble makes ours look like a walk in the park, and they've got these real problems. So, Trump's strategy is simple: constrain their ability to act aggressively long enough to where their internal situation won't allow it. And he's on track to achieve that. We need to win the 2028 election to make sure the Democrats don't get in and give away the store or something. But, you know, short of that, there's no saving China. And China could conceivably crack up mid-century. That's not going to happen tomorrow, but it could happen because China historically does. Chinese history is filled with periods in which the center cannot hold, primarily because its river systems tend to disunite the country, whereas the American river systems actually forcibly unite the country in a way that's unique in all the world. So Trump's strategy is brilliant here, but it's borrowed. It is straight out of Reagan, and it's working like crazy.
Okay, so let me just drill down on that. Reagan's strategy at the end of the day, though after the end of the first term, it got muddied by, I think, frankly, Nancy Reagan's desire for Reagan's legacy to be propping up Gorbachev and trying to keep the thing going. Fortunately, his first term, which was set on destroying the Soviet Union, had sufficient momentum going into that second term that I think they couldn't turn things around. But Rod, when you talk about the playbook, are you talking about Reagan seeking to put the Soviet Communist Party on the ash heap of history,
Yes.
and that Donald Trump is seeking to do the same thing to the Chinese Communist Party?
Unquestionably. And if you think about that second term, you know, in the first term, we had Brezhnev and then an interregnum, and then Andropov and then an interregnum, and then Chernyenko, and then he dies too. And so you just have chaos. And all these guys are hardliners. You could argue about, maybe Andropov, but these guys are all hardcore communists who believe in the Brezhnev doctrine, who are absolutely intent on world domination. Okay. And then you get Gorbachev. And Gorbachev understands that the internal contradictions of the system are bringing it down. And Reagan gave him the rope needed to hang himself. So, okay, he absolutely walked away from Reykjavik. He then negotiates the INF Treaty, which was a Reagan initiative to start with. That was his zero option all the way back at the beginning of the first term. And then you ultimately get to start. All of these things focus the communists in on their own problems in a way that encourages them not to behave too badly. So if solidarity is succeeding the way it did in 1990, in 1980, or 1970, you know what happens. The Red Army invades and kills everybody. In 1990, they end up taking over the country, and the Russians are just dumbfounded and can't do anything about it. That was the key to the coup attempt in August of 91. The hardliners in the Soviet Union believed that they could reassert control not just over Russia, but over the East Bloc. And the best way to do that was a confrontation with the West. And fortunately, praise God, that didn't work out for them, but that was their strategy. Gorbachev was exactly the man Ronald Reagan needed in power to collapse the thing. And Xi Jinping probably isn't that man, but he's also not young. And so pretty soon he's going to be Brezhnev, Andropov, and Chernenko.
Fascinating. And so this brings me at last to this question of Mexico and whether it is rising in part as a result of what Trump is doing to China and its precipitous decline. Talk about Mexico, Rod. This is a country that is awash with cartels and drug trafficking, human trafficking, and a lot of corruption in the central government, which is mostly communist, as best I can tell. Is this a good thing that Mexico is rising? And what about those factors that might make that less likely to succeed?
Oh yeah, it absolutely is. And I wrote a piece describing this on rodmartin.org that was published this morning. Mexico is a mess. Mexico is just filled with problems that are going to dog us for decades. You're not going to solve that in a fortnight. You're not going to solve that in a decade. But on the other hand, I mean, on balance, Mexico's probably better than Detroit. So, you know, 6-1. And the truth is, Mexico's close by. We can reach out and touch them. If the cartels get too far out of line, Donald Trump can do something about that, and there won't be a nuclear retaliation. So just putting that on the shelf for the moment, understanding that it's going to be a long-term process to sort that, and some of that has to be sorted on the U.S. side. They have cartels because we have high demand for drugs, and there's no escaping that. And we aren't solving either side of that equation to anybody's satisfaction at the moment, and we're going to have to. We also have a lot of bought judges and public officials in this country. Anybody who thinks that that is a uniquely Mexican problem just isn't paying attention. So that's a long-term thing. However, ignoring that for the moment and understanding that both sides have problems there, is it better for us to have ancillary and mid-level industry in Mexico than in China? Well, in every imaginable way. And ironically, what's happening to China here is the same thing that happened to the United States with regard to China. Chinese wages are up, depending on where you are in the country, between 10 and 15 fold over the last 3 decades. They are not a cheap labor destination anymore. And when Japan went through that same thing, they were successful in diversifying outside of the country for the lower wage labor. And they have this problem of the lost generation, but it's not directly from that. Japan got rich before it got old. China is getting old before it gets rich. They are never, ever going to be able to overcome that in the 21st century, at least. 20 seconds, another ball game, but we got a long time on this clock. And Mexico is well integrated into the North American economy. So, with a U.S. directed, capitalized, and dominated economic sphere, Mexico can be a much better partner that does many fewer bad things to us, steals much less intellectual property, generally causes fewer headaches. It's also cheaper from a transport perspective. They can ship things by truck or rail. It's a good thing. And the net result is Mexico is gonna get rich. And in the process of getting rich through licit means, they're gonna have the disposable income to eliminate the illicit to a much higher degree.
From your lips to God's ears, as I often say. Rod, this is very heartening and very important content. Thank you for sharing it with us. Come back next week, if you would, with much more. We'll be right back, folks. Stay tuned.